My name is Natalie. I'm on the marketing team here at FMCA. If you haven't seen me before, I've hosted a couple other ATEs. So I'm really excited to be here today. And today we have Dr. Roseann Capanna-Hodge. She is an integrative psychologist, author, and she's an expert in nervous system health. She has over 30 years of experience, and she is known for helping families and individuals move from dysregulation to healing. And we are very glad to have her with us today. Welcome, Dr. Roseann.
Well, I'm so excited to be here, and I love health coaches, and, you're changing the conversation for people who've been stuck.
Absolutely. So here's what today's session will look like. I'll give a brief overview. We'll start with a short presentation that Dr. Roseann has prepared, and then we'll move into some of the great questions that a few of you have submitted ahead of time. Make sure that you keep an eye out on ATE registration emails if you want to have a chance to pre-submit questions. We'll prioritize those. And then after that, we'll open it up for a live Q&A. So make sure to drop your questions in the chat toolbar in Zoom as we go along if you have anything come up, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. But before we dive into your presentation, I'd love, Dr. Roseann, if you could give a little brief background about yourself.
Yeah. Well, hi, everybody. I presented here a long time ago, I think on Pans and Pandas. I have a little bit in my presentation about me, but I, as Natalie said, I've been actually working for 3 decades in mental health, mostly with kids and families. I definitely work with adults, but my calling is really to support kids. And my specialty really is nervous system regulation and teaching people that the behaviors of kids and adults that we see really is just breadcrumbs and clues to how the nervous system is dysregulated. And I teach you natural science-backed ways to calm that nervous system, because no healing is possible without a regulated nervous system. The body does not allow it. It's called psychoimmunology. So that's the basis of, kind of what I do. I have a very, very small boutique clinic where I only take 5 or 6 people a month. I'm going to be retiring next year from my clinic because I have a big book called The Dysregulated Kid that's coming out in September of 2026. And I'm just moving in a different direction, also wanting to have a larger impact to really change this conversation. And most importantly, I'm the mom of 2 kids who struggled with regulation in one way, shape, or form. But I'm very passionate about what I do, and I'm grateful to be here teaching you.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, I will hand it over to you if you want to share your screen.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen.
Yep. And then, as I said,
the chat is only open that I can see to hosts and panelists. I don't see where it says everyone on it.
Yeah, there's a Q&A tool that they can submit.
Got it. Okay. Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a whole lot more sense. Okay. So please put questions in here. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these slides, but this is really helping you to understand a little bit about kind of my philosophies and really to empower you as health coaches to help people regulate the nervous system. What is different about my work is it is very prescriptive on the nervous system and getting you to reframe some of those concepts that our clients and why they get stuck. And honestly, this is why people come to me from all over the world, is this and the strategy behind it. And I do brain maps. So you already learned about this. One of the big things I do is QEEG brain maps. I've done well over 10,000 of them. I've spent 22 years doing neuropsych testing. I have a really unique perspective about things. I don't have this on here, but I have a top parenting podcast all about dysregulation. So this is my family. My kids are much older at this point. And I have a son Max, who really, I already was on this journey, but he really pushed me into this journey and taught me patience, which is not my virtue. And he has Lyme disease and PANS. And my younger kid, Max, of course, I married into a family of engineers. I'm sorry, JC. I married a family of engineers, which means they're all dyslexic. And poor JC was severe dyslexic, and we remediated it. So this is a truth. So from the onset of a problem, it takes about 11 years for somebody to get help in mental health. And many of our people, as health coaches, are starting out being told they have a physical problem, then quickly it goes into a mental health problem. And they land in the frontline workers, right? They land in the hands of mental health workers who know jack about integrative health. They're getting better, but I have been doing integrative mental health since 1992, you all. Some of you may not even been born. How cool is that? And everyone always asks me, how did I learn? I used to memorize books. And the first books, if you don't know, Prescription for Healing, Nutritional Healing by Bach and Bach, they usually have those out in health food stores. That's where I started, and I memorized those books. So 40 to 50% of kids diagnosed with a mental health issue aren't getting proper health. And that's a CDC statistic, but that's really pretty global. 14% of youths have a mental health problem across the globe. So you all know this, right? And why are these things increasing, right? So we're moving, all these clinical issues are super high level. I've seen stats between 1 in 4 and 1 in 6 of all U.S. adults are on a psych med. We know that many of these people have somatic issues, have physical issues. Mental health and physical health are tied, right? We're starting to be aware of that, but it has not changed how we treat anything in the allopathic side, right? And so dysregulation of the nervous system is a standard, and you can just assume anybody you're working with has a dysregulated nervous system. We live in a world of high stress. People accept high stress. And when it comes to kids, they have a lot of expectations that are terrible for them. Kids in first grade expected to write a friggin' paragraph. Like, come on. We were still cutting and pasting and having a good time. That's what you're supposed to. We see a rise in genetic mutations, diet, these deficiencies, coping skills across the board of all ages. Kids, adults are in the toilet. And so that is a problem. So, and by the way, my name is spelled not with an E at the end, and it's not spelled right, but that's okay. But just in case you want to search me. So I want you to reframe dysregulation, and this really encapsulates all of my work. So when we think of clinical issues, we have to start thinking about our understimulated parts of our nervous system. I call those our internalizers, and our externalizers, who are overstimulated nervous systems. And we'll talk about the basics of the nervous system, but I know you guys have already know some of that, but it's always good to hear it from different perspectives. So when we start to see those understimulated signs, which we're going to go into, right, they fall into these clinical buckets. Like people might have diagnoses of OCD or anxiety or learning problems or executive functioning. And then on the other side, we have overstimulated, right? They might have a mood disorder, or they might have things like pandas, autism, head injuries, right? But those clinical diagnoses, I'm a diagnostician, right? That's what people come to me. We do the brain map, we do that. But we have to start thinking about clinical symptoms, right? You're not a diagnostician, and that's actually empowering, because when we get people to focus on the symptoms, they can move away from these ideas that, oh, I have OCD, right? That means I have to always have that, and I always have to have obsessive thinking. That might not be the case, right? And maybe it is OCD. But we have to start looking as the symptoms of dysregulation and the clinical issues, which may be there, and these other symptoms may be exacerbators. We have to start looking things. So internalizing behaviors, right? You don't have to be ADD to be unfocused. You can have anxiety or a mood disorder, be unfocused. And we have to really say, what is going to help improve that? Is it, I'm working with a young adult, and she's very overwhelmed right out of the gate with daily life decisions. So she was like, I need executive functioning coaching. And I was like, girl, you've had executive functioning coaching since the last 10 years. What you need is a system to determine how to prioritize. because you go, I don't even know what to prioritize. There's so many things here, right? So we start looking at what are really the things holding people back, right? Instead of what's the clinical diagnosis. And this is a great young woman. She's in grad school. So now she thinks she's having every clinical issue. And she does have some of them. But I'm getting her to reframe instead of being caught up. Do I have this disorder and that disorder, and really starting to see the clinical issues. So the same thing with our overstimulated externalizers. So our overstimulated externalizers, adults, kids, these are people that get help faster. Why? Because you can't turn them off. Like, these are impulsive kids. These are kids that are aggressive. These are adults that cause problems in the workplace. These are people that have high conflict, right? So they tend to get help quicker, which is a great thing. But what we now know about a lot of our mental health system or physical health system is that we don't always give people the right help, right? Instead of saying, what's the first thing we have to do is regulate the nervous system. So kids with dysregulation have a huge impact, right, on the family, on the child, right? And I think one of the things, like, people always ask me, like, what are the greatest things that I've seen in these 3 decades? I would say number one is that I never expected to see such a rise in autism. And this is absolutely not related to better diagnostics. There are a lot more autistics, and that is just a reality of what it is. And we have to look at, you all are health coaches, it's multifactorial. So I didn't expect that. And for sure, I also really thought in 1992, when I really was just went to the research and said, I always had complex cases that nobody wanted. And I was like, well, I'm just going to go look in the belly of the basement at the microfiche and see what the research says. So it said nutrition, it said supplements, it said behavioral parenting, it said all kinds of things. So that's what I did. And then my kids that I worked with got better. I really thought we would be much further along with integrative care being a standard of care. I think we're turning. I think we still have a long ways ahead of us. I think health coaches are changing that conversation. But lastly, I think the greatest thing that I've seen since it started actually before the pandemic, and not to make a political statement, but in the 2016 election, I saw a shift towards a lot of overwhelm in people and a lot of just people feeling very comfortable just being disrespectful to others. And so now today, the greatest thing that we're seeing is that 48% of parents, according to the U.S. Surgeon General, feel overwhelmed. So we have a lot of very overwhelmed parents who have dysregulated kids, and they're not understanding it. They're thinking it's defiance. They're thinking it's, done on purpose. And so when we have these kids, and all kids dysregulate, by the way, this, you learn to self-regulate. You're not born self-regulated. There's so many factors in it. That's a whole other statement. But what we see is all of these strained relationships, conflicts, kids feeling bad about themselves, parents feeling bad about themselves, adults who are dysregulated in the workplace and their relationships having struggles and a whole lot of shame really leading our culture and feeling very uncertain. I think that I really have a lot of individuals that I work with that are like, what do I do? And this is how they find people like us, because they're realizing what they've been doing doesn't work. And that's exciting, but we need to be more proactive instead of reactive so that we can prevent that 11 years that it takes from the time that somebody identifies there's an issue to get proper help, which is just so disconcerting. And when you're, as a parent, when you have a child who's struggling, there is nothing more important than helping your child not struggling. And the path is just way, way, way too long. And actually, just so everybody knows, the number one reason adults in the workplace who are parents take leave is their child's behavioral and mental health issues. That's why a lot of companies hire me, actually. So what causes dysregulation, right? There are way more things than here. It's just cool looking, and, the mind likes circles. And, feel free to put questions in the Q&A so that I can see it later. But many, many things are leading to this dysregulation, and there's so many environmental factors. And this is where health coaches can really help people, because it's shocking to people how little they know when they actually start working with people like us. I have a friend, a newer friend, that quickly we become good friends. And she said to me, my wife has long haulers. And, I work with all these kids with PANS and adults with Lyme and all this other stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. And then she had gotten sick. And she was in the hospital for 15 days. And I was like, ain't nobody in the hospital for 15 days. And I said, how bad is this long haulers? Like, what does that mean? And I learned she, got COVID in March of 2020, never went back to work. When I physically laid eyes on her, I was like, is this like a 95-year-old? Like, my 87-year-old dad is literally way more spry than this early 50s woman. And anyway, I was like, you got to come in and get a brain map. And, we got to do all that. And, here's the sad part about it. She's seen dozens and dozens and dozens of doctors. And not one person recommended anything related to what we can do to help people. No dietary changes, no lifestyle components. It was like, well, you have to live like this. And, so I said, of course you don't have to live like this. I said, this is great news. Nobody's told you what to do. We have nowhere to go but up. But this is the kind of things that happen to people, right? Like, so now her nervous system is, of course, that's what I saw in that brain map, totally activated, came to see me drinking a Coca-Cola. I was like, girl, ain't nobody come to see me with a Coca-Cola. That is over. That's your last Coke right there. But I know why she's doing it, to stimulate herself. So we've got to rebalance. There are many, many factors that cause dysregulation, but it's the dysregulation that keeps everybody stuck in their mental health or physical health rut, whatever you want to call it. So, and I see that, and that's my work. That's what I've been doing. So we need to start thinking about, what are those root causes? How does the dysregulation keep people stuck in their symptoms? And you are an important part in that. And this is literally what I do every day. And I didn't put a lot of brain maps in here, but what's really cool about brain maps is that I can see over the structures, and I can see the brain communication. So the red, no surprise, means overstimulated. This is very common. I see this in young kids. This is probably somebody with, this is definitely somebody who's got panic attacks. Their brain is in a constant looping. And so there's no way, if your brain is in a constant looping, there is no way you cannot have physiological symptoms. And then the blue is a brain that is understimulated, right? Actually, infections and toxins can cause this. This could be somebody with severe learning issues. There can be a lot of things. It's just one piece, but it's a great data point. Sometimes you don't need it, but it's helpful. And I don't know how to work without a brain map anymore, because I just use it and I'm like, hey, this is what it is. In that same brain of my friend who came here, my running theory was that the COVID opened up something that was there. And that is exactly what I saw in the brain map. And 100% she's got Lyme disease. I'm going to be sending her to a Lyme specialist. And I think that is what is keeping her there. But she had severe activation, the stress too. So you already know about the autonomic nervous system, I'm assuming. But I'm going to tell you, one of the greatest services I provide to every single client is just a few-minute discussion of the autonomic nervous system. The average person has no idea what it is. They don't know that it is our manager of our stress response. And it's very comforting for people to understand things from a brain perspective. They don't take offense to it. They helps them to be like, oh, okay, my brain, my nervous system is doing that. But then I quickly empower them with those tools, from nutrition to supplements to breath work, all the things we'll talk about. So always take a minute to explain that parasympathetic to sympathetic dominance and how we're supposed to get activated, but then go back to a healthy baseline, and what happens to all of our clients that are struggling with physical or mental health, that they move in this sympathetic dominant state, and how detrimental it can be, but how much power a person has over that. And you know what happens in a chronic stress response is your, from a brain perspective, your primitive brain is designed to be looking for threats. And so when somebody moves into the sympathetic fight, flight, freeze, or now fawn state, your amygdala starts misperceiving information. Things come in hot, as I like to tell everybody. So then you start pumping cortisol, you start moving to that. And in theory, your frontal lobes are supposed to put the brakes on. Now, what happens to people in a chronic stress state, which I see on brain maps, is that actually stops working, because you can't just go all the time. You got to replace your brake pads. And then our occipital lobe at the back of the head is actually supposed to pump feel-good brain waves, alpha, and be like, hey, there's a fire here. Let me just put it out. But what happens is it wears out. And so these are physiological things that keep people stuck. Now, you can rebuild this. We'll talk about tools. But this is higher level that I'm giving to you, but we have to get our HPA access. We have to get that regulated, and health coaches are well positioned to do that. And certainly our gut, right? I think there was a research study that came out this week that talked about that when we do bacterial support in our gut, that it starts positively impacting the brain in 20 minutes. How awesome is that? Now, I'm super advanced on interpreting brain maps, and I actually can tell when somebody's gut has gone down. I'm going to tell you that I almost have nobody who has a healthy gut. And it's just so important. 90% of serotonin is created in there, dopamine. It is so important for mental health. And, you need your mental health for healing yourself. Healing is not easy. And so your mental health will block you. Part of why I love to work with kids is because they don't know they can't get better. Adults, they try to outthink it. And they're like, well, I can ignore it. No, you can't. So there's ways. So when the brain is dysregulated, physiologically, once you move into a sympathetic dominant state, you cannot pay attention. You can't think. You cannot manage emotions or take action. Your executive functioning will go offline as a primitive reflex. And then you now know the body isn't healing itself, because the resources of your body, your hormones, your neurotransmitters, you name it, are all going to that stressor. Again, the psychoimmunology. So we've got to calm the brain. I actually have a PMF now. So I want to talk about what self-regulation looks like in a person of any age. Basically, these are people, it's not to say you never go into stress mode, but they are calm. They know there's a solution, and they don't dysregulate like the wind. What we are moving towards as an American society and some of the other countries, because I see people from all over the world, they are following, not at our level. It's like, I don't like this. I don't want to, you are taking too long in this line. I like to be able to tell you whatever I think. This is what's happening in our world. People are quick to dysregulate. They're quick to lash out on people. And it is a problem of dysregulation. There's a whole other part of it too. But when somebody's regulated, they can cope. They can manage, and they can say, my nervous system isn't activated at this level, right? Doesn't mean that it's not getting activated, but they know they can bring it down at a subconscious level, and they do things proactively to manage it, right? Never perfect. I always tell all my parents I work with, I only expect you to be 80% accurate or, good at what you're doing. Nobody should be 100%. But their body knows what it's like to be in a parasympathetic state. And as a result, they can think, they can take action, they can do all of those things. And this is a really important part of your work, because if we ignore the nervous system, they're just not going to get farther. There's a lot of benefits through research of self-regulation, everything from physical, mental health to moral development to your overall success in life. Only people who are really going to maintain a high level of success are people that are regulated, in general, right? There are outliers. We won't talk about that. But there's just so many health benefits. And again, self-regulation, you can be dysregulated and you can be 50 years old. We all know those people. And you can find a way to self-regulate. Your trauma, your history does not define you. Your genetics do not define you. These are things people can achieve. It's much harder when you're older because you have to learn healthy habits. And we get stuck in our brain forms associations, right? So I have lots of things that I do for dysregulation. And please know this is not a comprehensive list of everything known to man. These are the things I use a lot of. That's me doing a brain map. But natural tools. Of course, you are really educating people about lifestyle, those healthy habits, sleep. I talk a lot about breath work and diaphragmatic breathing, 4-7-8, just integrating things into their lives. This is the hardest thing that I do. When I use my other tools like neurofeedback, PEMF, it's like piece of cake because I can regulate anybody's nervous system, even somebody who's never had a nervous system that regulated. It's the healthy habits and getting and supporting people, because sometimes people think, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. Oh, okay. So these are just easy things that I like to do of any age. Again, I'm a huge fan of breath work, whether it's a box breath or 4-7-8 is personally what I do, doing grounding techniques. And what I get people to do is I get them to commit for 30 days. There is no, anybody who watches me on YouTube, I literally have magic wands on my desk. I also have a really nice rhinestone one. Everyone thinks that when they work with me, there's some magic wand. So yes, I can regulate the nervous system, but it's these things that keep it regulated. And this is how we build good health. I'm a big fan of sensory of all ages, weighted blankets, little tools, things that you use. But I think the hardest thing is the behavioral coaching. And then also use these advanced tools, which I'll talk to you a little bit about. So I have my own device, PEMF. I'm not here to sell that. I'm a big fan of PEMF. Why? Because it does three things. One, it pulls you instantaneously in a parasympathetic state, whether the person knows it or not, it's doing it. Two, it's changing the way the cells are functioning and talking. And three, it's going to improve detoxification, which is going to lower your inflammation. And inflammation is one of the greatest threats to our health and mental health. We know, for example, 72% of autistics in post-mortem studies show extensive neuroinflammation. Of course, there's a connection there, right? At 72%, it's not 5%, right? But it really, it uses low-frequency magnetic fields to really pull out unhealthy, disharmonious frequencies and heals. It's, very popular. There's all kinds. I'm not here to say, which is what. Mine is designed for my people and what they have. I'm a big fan of neurofeedback. There's all kinds of neurofeedback. I'm not going to trash talk. My field is very patriarchal. And they like to talk about their equipment. Your neurofeedback is only as good as the person doing it. End of story. Don't let anybody tell you this kind is this. I do EEG because my people are very complex. Anytime you have people with layered health issues, EEG is much more controllable. And that's where the research is. And I don't do anything without research. I don't promote anything that doesn't have solid research, because I have to be careful because I'm a trailblazer. I've been pushing this conversation in a field full of people that are disbelievers. Mental health providers are very, very against integrative. I mean, they get mad in a thread if you're promoting essential oils. They are pro-pharma, like almost more than therapy. It's kind of disconcerting. It's changing. But I did a podcast recently with a chiropractor. Do you know how many people sent me an email that I was pissed that I did a podcast with a chiropractor? I mean, they were like, oh, it's terrible. There's no evidence on that. That's not true. Like, and we should be open to the possibilities for people of what they are. So, but neurofeedback is solid. There's tens of thousands of studies, 3,000 peer-reviewed studies. Again, very highly determined by the person who's doing the neurofeedback. You need to be board certified. Health coaches, unless you have another license, in almost every state, you cannot get certified. You have to work under somebody else. And you want to do that. You are training somebody's brain. You can have a huge positive effect. But I'm a huge fan of it. I've worked with the most extreme cases and been able to turn people around. I'm going to be sad when I stop doing neurofeedback. This is my system. I use CALMS, dysregulation. It's really simple. It's really about co-regulating. And co-regulating isn't just with your child. It's really being that calm for the people around you. And it's super, super important in this place where people are so activated. They don't realize the power in attuning themselves to regulate themselves to support the people around them, right? I mean, almost every person we work with is in a family unit. And there's so much power in that. And when we have this co-regulation, we are using these kinds of tools, right? And co-regulation isn't just concept, it's actions, right? So are we breathing? Are we co-breathing with the people? Are we mirroring the behavior we expect from others, right? I always tell parents, right? Like, I don't want you to yell at your kids to stop yelling. We've all done it. But what's the physical touch that's allowed? Like, what is your body language? What are you saying to people? Like, these are things that are incredibly powerful, and we're not sharing it. Of course, it's going to be in my book. But I want to talk a little bit about the role of coaches. So you are frontline workers, and I love it. And what I have found more than anything is that the magic in working with a client is the trust they have in you. And, you know, where can you start that can give them a quick win, right? What's one thing? And people are so overwhelmed. Like, I deal with these, you know, I have people flying in their jets to come and see me, right? And I have cops, I have everybody, right? And I just have to give them a quick win. You know, is it breath work? Is it that one food that's going to change? If you try to do too much, which I have been guilty of, it is no longer possible in 2025 to give people giant plans. Think about what they can do, and that builds the trust. And you really want to pay attention to those signs of over and under stimulation and educate people that autonomic nervous system, pay attention to the activations, touch that place in your body. I do this with 3-year-olds. Where you feel that worry in your body, and they'll touch, oh, right here, or maybe it's their belly. That's what you need to concentrate on for them. It doesn't have to be that complex. And, you know, this is where they're willing to work with you and partner with you. And, you know, these are the things that health coaches can do. Active listening, be very careful as a therapist. I'm going to tell you, active listening does not mean people get to sit and complain for an hour. I am not that therapist, right? So feel heard and, oh, I hear you. Okay, so your stomach is really, hurting you. Repeat back. Make sure they feel validated. But also, as I talk a lot about my mom and dad, Tony and Philomena, my mom passed away. She's a real character in my book. She was nothing but power. She made me look like I was wimpy. That's how powerful she was. And so she would say, move your coolie, which means move your ass in Italian. And so we have to be making sure that our clients have actionable goals and they are moving through them. If they are not moving through their goals, they need to be readjusted because people are so overwhelmed. 41% of parents are so overwhelmed that they are immobilized. That is a frightening statistic, right? But you are their accountability partner, and you're going to teach them about all those ways to regulate, not just nutrition. Nutrition can be a great regulator, but they need to do those body strategies, those mindfulness activities. And, of course, you're modeling calm, and I love to share with my clients, like they know, like I'm here with my PMF device. I always have it on and they'll ask me like, oh, are you doing this? Are you doing that? And I always tell them I am a spaz. This is my number one problem. I have super high levels of energy and I do a lot. And so my problem is I need to really do things to bring myself down. And it is a struggle. But I do it and I tell them all the ways that I do it. And I was like, I don't want you to get overwhelmed by all the ways I do it. I want you to know that that's how serious I take it. And you're going to start by doing X. So always sharing is really helpful. I don't know how long I went, but I am going to start answering some of your questions.
That was great. Thank you so much. I'm sure everybody learned a lot. I know I did. You beautifully touched on how health coaches really play such a crucial role in what dysregulation and regulation is. Health coaches are positioned perfectly because they really focus on lifestyle and guiding and educating clients. So thank you. If you want to stop screen sharing, then they'll be able to see.
Oh, okay. Sorry. There we go.
Great. Perfect. All right. We can dive into some questions now. So
we'll go the first questions. There you go. That people submitted.
Yep. Yeah. We're going to go through the pre-submitted questions and then we'll dive into the Q&A. All right. So our first question is, what role does a traumatic labor or birth experience play in the baby's nervous system becoming dysregulated as a result of the traumatic birth?
Yeah. Well, first of all, whenever we talk about hard stuffs, I always have solutions. Okay. So, and traumatic births, because of the brain maps I do, and having worked with so many thousands of people, are much more of a prevalent cause than people realize. And, they're not going to tell you had a traumatic birth, like that your kid, had an APGAR of this, and then, oh, but now it's a 9, so they're fine, because they don't want liability. But I often see damage to the brain. I've even seen where kids are born with the monitor sensors, like, and you could, but it is much more common. And even they don't talk about, when kids are yanked out, what it does in terms of the system, but it is a very common cause. Now, here's a telltale sign that was an issue, is those kids have problems right out of the gate. They'll tend to have colic and, a lot of other issues, and they tend to just be more easily dysregulated. And they need, when we have kids where things aren't working, and particularly when we have multiple kids, and you realize, well, that kid is definitely different, right? So I had my Max, and he got bitten by a tick at 22 months. So he really changed, but he already was intense. So he started talking at 7.5 months. No surprise, right? But his brother was so chill. It was like he came out with born magnesium flowing through his blood, and I really got to see those differences. But they need clinical therapies to help their nervous system regulate. And you can absolutely change that. You can change the entire trajectory of their lives. And these are kids that get a lot of diagnoses, but traumatic births, and even traumatic, not even the births, moms experiencing trauma when a baby is in utero absolutely can affect a child. But again, there are treatments and ways to support that and lessen the impact.
Thank you. Our next question. I've listened to your podcast on helping children regulate their emotions, and you have said it's never too late. which is encouraging. What would you say are the most effective strategies for helping a young teenager regulate his or her emotions?
Yeah, so it's never too late. If you can get a teenager to do probably somatic work before they do breath work, and that simple somatic technique of touch your body where you're feeling it right now, because we live in a world where everybody wants to disconnect, right? So they're binge watching on YouTube. The people are drinking 3 to 6 alcoholic beverages a night. This is all disconnection. Disconnection furthers you from being able to regulate your nervous system. It's not to say we all shouldn't binge watch. I'm watching Mobland right now on Paramount. But that's not my go-to. That's just for fun. So we want them to reconnect and then just really simply ask them to breathe through it. If they can't do breath work, we want them to say, well, what could you do to lessen it right now? And you let them figure it out. The point of it is you have to model it. You have to do it with them, and you have to prioritize it. So your nervous system needs practice. If you teach it to be regulated, it will go back. If you teach it to be overstimulated, it will stay there. So this is a change, a lifestyle change, just like anything else. But it is absolutely possible. And when teenagers are resistant, because I get resistant kids, I go, do you like this? Whoever says yes, well, are you willing to do some of these things? And they are, but the parents have to do it too. It's not going to work if the parents aren't going to do it.
Great, thank you. Next up, what is your opinion on devices that help with stress, such as BrainTap, Apollo Neuro, and Omni PEMF? I know you touched a little bit on this in your presentation, but if you want to elaborate.
They're all useful. And it's just like anything else. You got to use them.
Yep, use the tools you have.
Yeah, so there's nothing, like they're all good. Like there's nothing wrong with them. Now, there are certain devices that are better for certain things, right? That's a whole other conversation. And I just want to say devices grew in the pandemic. The amount of devices that came out in the last 5 years are more than what was developed in the previous 20. So like people always say, what do you think of this one? I don't have an answer, but they're all great. They need to be used daily though. I mean, a lot of these devices don't have the power behind them, especially the lower cost ones, but they still work and they're great.
Are you familiar with the dynamic neural retraining system, and is it effective?
So again, like everyone we have a patriarchal neurofeedback world, and they like to talk about their devices. I'm not going to be saucy because this is recorded. And so it's not the device, it's the person using it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Important.
Yeah.
All right. Those are our pre-submitted questions. So I guess we'll dive into the live Q&A. So first off, have you ever helped someone with internal tremors, been tested for MS, and looks to have no signs of it? My doctors are perplexed and want to just give pills to potentially help. No one knows. Any guidance, or have you heard of this?
Yeah. So I've had lots of clients with internal tremors. I have somebody who's just starting out right now, and here's what I'm going to tell you. It's almost always infection related. And just so everybody knows, I'm in Connecticut outside of New York. That's why a lot of people don't mind flying to see me, because you just get right into New York. But I'm in one of the greatest areas of tick-borne infection. So I don't believe everybody has tick-borne infection, but I'm going to tell you a lot of people have tick-borne infection. And so, what I have found with tremors is you must consciously work on regulating that nervous system, and tools like neurofeedback, PEMF help a lot. But there's probably something that's missing that hasn't made that connection. And, that's where those functional doctors help. Unfortunately, and fortunately, somebody is only as good, as their experience, right? And the more you work, the longer you work, the more complex cases you have. I am very medically focused because I had to right out of the gate. I had those kinds of cases, but tremors I've seen improve with people using daily tools, and meditation, all those things make a difference.
Yeah, and that's what health coaches do, the daily lifestyle thing. So that's very important. Next, for coaches, how do you objectively evaluate someone for dysregulation when this is their normal and they think they're, quote, fine? What
Yeah.
tools would you recommend?
Great question. Because really, here is where this is helpful is those signs of dysregulation, those under and overstimulated. I literally would ask them. And then I would ask them, I like to do, I use metrics for everything. So I say, like, on a scale of, 1 to 10, right, for an adult, how much is this an interference in your life, right? Or how much you experience this. And when you're right, when somebody is super dysregulated, they aren't aware of it. All the people around them are aware of it, and maybe they don't have a lot of relationships, but it's really getting them. I ask people, what are your top 3 things you want to address? And that gives me a lot of clues. And then I listen and I break it down and I make everybody have a symptom checklist. There's never more than 10 things on it. And I usually put 3, and they are very physiological based, whatever that is. So break it down and make it connection. Because if you say, oh, you're anxious, I had one of the most anxious elderly people I've ever had in my entire life, and she was repelled by that word. So I said, oh, well, you're activated. She was okay with that. And so I just changed my language, and then I was like, okay. And her activation was stopping her from healing with Lyme disease. She was working with some of the top people. So for sure.
Next up, what is the brain map test called and how does one get one? Where can they find it?
Yeah. And somebody said, is a brain map done with an electronic device or is it done through symptoms directly? So there was a picture where there was a cap. So this is what a brain map is. Sorry, didn't say what it was. So a brain map is a cap that you put on your head, just like when we suspect somebody has seizures, it's called EEG. So you're reading the surface electrical activity, right? So we do them. People come in. That's what we do a lot of. People come in one time, and then I do a sit down with them and they go, and they don't even do treatment with me. They just go on their own. But you can get them anywhere. You want to be very careful and go to somebody who is a certified neurofeedback provider. Very few certified in brain maps. I'm not even certified in brain maps because it's too busy. And and I could have been grandfathered in. I didn't even have to take the test. I was like, I'm just too busy. So what happens is you then read it. You're put in a database. There's different databases depending on where people sign up with databases, but they have males and females around your age range. And basically, I'm reading patterns. And those patterns, based on somebody's clinical experience and what we know about the brain, gives you clear indicators. So just like I can tell when somebody has, I actually can really tell when somebody has a leaky gut. I can tell when they're not absorbing protein. I'm 100% accurate on Lyme disease and tick-borne infection. How do I know? Because every time I send them to a physician and they get tested, and 100%. So you're using it to see what the areas of dysregulation are under and overstimulation, and you're using that to guide your protocols and treatments. That's what I do, and it's pretty awesome. So, and you are doing, somebody like me, I'm doing clinical intake. So I know clinically, where does it show up behaviorally? It's a really, really cool thing, and I love it. So,
all right. Next, how do caffeinated drinks affect the nervous system in the short and the long term?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not opposed to caffeine. It's just when people over rely on it. I'm drinking a tea. It's from this morning. There's one tea bag of caffeine. The other one's a detox tea. So basically it's going to stimulate your nervous system, right? And so your nervous system, if you're only having, they say general rule of thumb is 2 caffeinated beverages. It shouldn't affect you. There is that people who have that genetic variant where caffeine doesn't affect them and they could drink coffee at like midnight. God bless you. I mean, I can't do anything after 1 o'clock. But it creates a pattern when you over rely on it as an up and down, and your nervous system and your adrenals can't really get to what it needs to. Certainly very anxious people, it's not a great idea to put things in that overstimulate you, for sure. But it's not going to lead to emotional dysregulation unless that's your go-to anyway.
Yeah, all about balance. Can you discuss the balance of implementing regulation strategies proactively each day versus as a response in the moment to dysregulation?
Yeah. So it is when you regulate your nervous system on the regular, right? You're moving your autonomic nervous system from, let's say you have a trauma background, right? I was one of the 9 approved providers for Sandy Hook. I did a lot of work with 9/11, right? Because I'm right outside of New York. So I've had extremes, right? But I think you have to expect, just so you know, when people have chronic health issues and they've had good providers and they're not getting better, 99% of the time they have a trauma background. They might not even know it was a trauma background. They have a trauma background. I'm just going to tell you that right now. And so what happens is, let's say they're activated, right? When you start doing proactive strategies, your nervous system starts moving down. You reset the homeostasis so that it just doesn't bounce up. You keep doing this. When you then have a stressor, and you're moving your nervous system so that it has wiggle room, because even when you're sympathetic dominant, you still have this tippy top part of your autonomic nervous system where it goes offline to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? But you start creating space. You give an opportunity to your nervous system to move into a parasympathetic, and those tools start happening automatically, right? If you ever think about like any kind of habit that you do, like I am Epstein-Barr, got it at 17. I take thyroid medication every day. I just do it. I have to actually think, did I take it? Because it's part of my routine, right? It comes like brushing your teeth, and your nervous system is able to regulate on its own. And then when you are stressed, you don't even have to think about it. You'll employ those tools. It becomes a double positive thing for you, if that's helpful to understand.
I'm habitual.
Yeah.
Right.
And an automatic innate level. And that's the cool part. When you start getting your clients to do things without thinking about it and it's healthy, you've done good work.
That's what the goal is always. Are there specific nervous system regulation tools for people with ADHD? And are there differences in the tools between the types, inattentive versus hyperactive?
You know, everything I do, like people ask, like I work virtually and all other stuff. Yes, I do work virtually. I do really like to have a brain map first, but I do work with people without it, and that's okay. And I do it depending on, I have ethical responsibility. But each person I work with has a custom plan. So what your support team, your family ecosystem makes a huge difference, right? So like if I have a parent who is like on totally maxed out, right? My outcomes are different depending on what I'm able to do with them, and how I treat things, right? But it is different in how you treat a very impulsive person. There's much more of a sense of urgency for me, whether I have an adult or a kid when they're impulsive, because guess what? They're burning bridges. They're burning bridges with their teachers and their partners, and they're this and they're that. So I've got to do things at a different level, right? So I get a lot of people who are proactively doing things way more. They tend to be young kids, and I've been able to help people lose their diagnoses completely, everything from autism and stuff. I just saw one of my kids who they were told to institutionalize him as a young kid, just graduated from one of the top universities. So it's like that time of year where I see them on my Facebook feed and I'm so proud. I had somebody graduate with a PhD from Yale, and they were told at 2.5 to institutionalize him. So it's really cool when you do things for this over time, and you get to see the ripple effect. But everything is different, but I'm going to tell you, no matter what your clinical issue is, you do not get the same outcomes unless you regulate that nervous system. If you're over or understimulated, that nervous system needs to power down. We are not designed to be on all the time, and we are. I didn't even talk about devices, but we are. And I struggle with that myself. Like, how do I turn myself off? So, I had gotten myself into a habit of writing from 2 to 4 a.m. Not healthy. Had to stop that.
Yeah. Yeah, life is so go, go, go these days. It affects all of us somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I was producing good stuff, which is also really scary. But I had to be like, that is not okay to do that, you know? So, I'm also in the change time. So I was like, it's just the hormones, but you know, I got those settled and, you know, you got to look to your root causes. Why are you dysregulating? You need to sleep,
Yeah.
you know?
With that said, we do have a question. Speaking of hormones, are there techniques that could be used to lower cortisol?
Absolutely. I mean, anytime you're pulling yourself into a parasympathetic state, you are lowering your cortisol levels. Your body and the beauty, you know, in psychoimmunology, as everything goes, I always say like you activate and your troops go, okay, there's war. Let me move out of the barracks and go to our encampment. Once you regulate, everything will come back online. You still need corrective actions a lot of times, right? You've depleted all your cortisol. Who hasn't done that? I've done that so many times. It's not even funny.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm going to retire, because I can't do this other stuff. I do everything and I just can't. Like, it just physiologically can't, you know? And your body will start working and improving. Regulation is the unlocker. It really is.
With that said, we talked a lot about tools and whatnot, but what health coaches can really do is help with lifestyle. And so we have a question. Can you speak to vagus nerve stimulation in relation to calming dysregulation? I think this is where health coaches actually are very well positioned.
Yeah. So, you know, the vagus nerve, right, connects our brain and our gut. It's a bidirectional component. So they each influence each other, and we are talking a lot about it. There's a lot of tools that are sexy, and it's the vagus nerve and all that, but it is really about regulating your nervous system. And so anytime, whether it's breath work or you're using one of those fun, you know, vagus nerve stimulators, I do butterfly tapping, you know, EFT tapping. I was doing EFT tapping before it was called EFT tapping. And those kids grew up on my street, by the way. They're really nice. And Alex and Nick grew up on my street. Apparently almost ran over my car, they told me later, when I was a teenager. Fun story. But your vagus nerve, right? Anything we can do to get you into a parasympathetic state, whether, you know, any activity, they are a vagus nerve activator, right? And there are other techniques that you can use, and they're helpful. So, but you are well positioned, whether you're doing things like heart math, you're teaching people EFT tapping, you're doing somatic techniques that are very simple. You know, do what feels right to you, right? Like, I tried to study EMDR, I did hypnosis. Like, I was like, I don't want to do that, you know, like, but they're great tools. So do what really feels right. What I found is that these little devices, right? People like them. Like, you know, my device, look at me. I stick it in my strap here, right? Like, you put it in your pocket. Anything that's convenient becomes easy to integrate into habits, right? And you might have a client. I have clients who are spending 2 or 3 hours a day doing great things for themselves. I got no time for that. Right? So what's realistic for your client? What's affordable? What can be done? A lot of my clients didn't want to stick with heart math. Why? Because you got to consciously do it. So anything that you can do to simplify, even my 4-7-8 breaths, I make them put it on their phone and have timers that alert 3 times a day. So they're forcing themselves to do it. Then I say, how many times did you do that? So, and if that doesn't work, I figure it out. You know, so, but you're in a great position to help your clients with these tools. You really are.
Great. We are out of time. I'll try to do one more. I think this is a great question to end on. A very optimistic question. What has been helpful to you as you move someone from talking about their challenges to action and hope?
You know, honestly, truthfully, I mean, I can tell you exactly who's going to be helpful. I mean, not helpful, really progress. As people who have faith and they are connected spiritually in some way, shape, or form. So there are 2 things that help me. So right away, I try to assess if they have a sense of spirituality. those people, regardless, I could have two people with pandas, and one will be an extreme case, like extreme, and then another case where it's less. They have unlimited healing potential. The people without a sense of faith and religious faith, as well as hope, don't. So I try to activate the hope, which is my hardest work. And what I do is I get right in there and I'm like, what's the thing that's holding you back from the hope? And I like to make people cry. It's really helpful. If you come to me and you don't cry, I've not done my work. And sometimes I cry with people. I mean, it's just who I am. I'm not going to be apologetic about it. But really helping them to get into that deep part. And, you don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to solve it for them. You just have to be there when they identify it. And maybe you need to connect them to a therapist. But nobody should be doing therapy work. My therapist friends hate me. But it's the truth. You need to regulate your nervous system. They all hate therapy because they go into therapy and they activate. So get them to connect to hope. It sounds so basic, but it is literally the thing that will define you. In our 6-month program, the first part, 3 months, is getting the parents to connect with hope because that was blocking us. So when I get people listening to my show and they're like, we listen, we know we got to make dietary changes. We know we're going to listen. We know they can't come to you. If anybody tries to come to me who's rude, disrespectful, or demanding, you're exited out. Like, you don't get to come to me. You're told I'm no longer accepting patients. But it's those people that are like, I got the hope, I believe, and that's hard to activate when you've had people, like, how many times people have come to me that have been sick for 12 years, 20 years. It happens every day. So we have to honor that. And that will be your biggest blocker.
Yeah.
So,
the foundation of someone's health journey and making a difference is really finding the why. And that is at the heart of what health coaches can do. And, if someone
and providing hope that it can get better, like my friend's wife, I was like, 100% we're getting better. It's like not even an option. Like, it's just a degree. That's the part I don't know. And so, like, just igniting that fire is really helpful. Compliance is hard when you're like, you're a family and your family has Cheetos and soda, and you're breaking away from that. There's a lot of emotional attachments to that. So, and, whenever somebody says like, oh, does food really make a difference? Of course it does, people. Like, I was like, what do you want me to say? Of course it does.
Yeah. Beautiful.
But you guys are doing an amazing job. And I hope I inspired you to, like, regulate the nervous system.
Yes, this has been so insightful. I know that everyone has learned a lot. We didn't get to all the great questions.
Yeah.
And Dr. Roseann, where can they reach you? I'll provide all of your contact information, but if you want to share your podcast.
The best way is drroseann.com. It's spelled right here. So drroseann.com. That is the place to reach me.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And I hope to see you on our next Ask the Expert. Bye. Thank you, Dr. Roseann.
Bye.